In the past, 15 years, there's been a massive explosion in popularity of anime in the West. I remember the time where the main way you could watch it here was in multiple parts on YouTube, because kudos if you could catch it on TV. We didn't even have the same selection up here in Canada that you guys got to watch in the US. So how is it, in the past few years, there's been a massive surge in popularity of a special way of enjoying our favorite anime? On stage. I'm not kidding. Japan has put together so many over the past few years, a few that you might be familiar with. Death Note, Spirited Away, Spy Family, and now even Demon Slayer has a stage adaptation. But why do these work so well? Live-action adaptations have always seemed to be hit or miss when it comes to anime. At least this is the case when bringing them to the silver screen in live action. In the past few years, though, theater adaptations have been coming out more and more of different animes, most of these being musicals and doing really well. Death Note, My Hero Academia, Attack on Titan, and Demon Slayer, just to name a few. But how do you tell an entire television series worth of stories that have so many locations without blowing your entire budget just on the set? This is how the Demon Slayer stage show goes about doing it without breaking your immersion. Oh, and don't worry, most of what I'm going to show and talk to you about is from the first act and a bit of Act 2 of the Demon Slayer stage show. If you're watching the anime, this covers Season 1, Episodes 1 through 8. The show as a whole goes until Episode 13, but I won't be covering the last part in this video. So as long as you've gotten past Season 1 of the anime, you don't need to worry about spoilers here. The stage show is available to watch though on Crunchyroll, not sponsored, if you want to check it out after this. A bit of background on the show, as I imagine there's many of you out there that didn't even know this was a thing. From January 18th to January 26th of 2020 at the Galaxy Theater in Shinagawa in Tokyo. Directed by Kenichi Sumetsu, this first part brings to the stage the first 13 episodes of Season 1 of the Demon Slayer in a musical, yes, musical format. They broke up Season 1 into two parts. Part 1 going only until episode about 13 or 14 depending on where you choose to cut it, and Part 2 being the Spider Family arc and meeting the Hashira. Unfortunately, at the moment, only Part 1 is easily accessible for me here in Canada at the moment. After the breakup of Season 1, each arc afterwards has its own show. With the Swordsmith arc having just been announced earlier this month, you can find the links to all the fun stuff about the show and the consecutive parts in the description below. Now, let's go into the tech stuff. Projections. Gotta love them. You can do so much with them without worrying about moving major set pieces around. And projection mapping? Glorious. The constant adjustments that one needs to make sure a multi-projector projection mapping stays at the same calibration is a pain in the butt, and something that you can sit there for hours and constantly work on and never get just quite as well done as you want it to be. Vibrations in the building from something as little as cars driving by are enough to throw off calibration. You have to be very careful with them, and this Demon Slayer musical did an incredible job at making sure that they were amazing. If anybody on the creative team ends up seeing this, please feel free to reach out. I would love to know how many projectors and team members went into making this a reality. Because not only are they projection mapping onto major backgrounds, but they also have 4 smaller projection screens that move around the set that the actors actively interact with both in front of and behind. And it's all so beautifully done. They have these smaller screens to enhance the movement in the fights, and they are beautifully choreographed to make the demons and the characters feel like they're moving in ways that are more accurate to the show. I can only really give it a comparison to the show as I personally haven't read the manga yet. Allowing them to move around to all the different locations in the show, but also allowing the demons to have their supernatural element to them. One scene was even able to use the smaller screens to look like the demon head was just floating there on stage during Tanjiro's first encounter with the demons post-attack on his home. With so many characters losing their head in the show, the creativity that went into how they did it in each sequence is just amazing. The show is also helped by the use of smaller set pieces that come on stage and have some part of the set be physical and feel dimensional, allowing the actors to come in and out of buildings, beds in some scenes, and etc. Had it all been projected onto the backdrop, there's a risk of the stage feeling very flat, but those pieces help stop that from happening. Speaking of that big projection screen, I just want to make mention of a great thing they do with it. A couple of times during the show, they have the characters behind it being backlit so the audience can see them. More often, they are up at the top corners of on a platform behind the screen. This is used to show characters giving mental advice or to show some of the ones that would appear in a flash on the screen, allowing the characters to both be there for the audience but not actually be a part of the scene below. On to the next projection area that they use that's very unique to the show, the arch. Most theaters have what's called a proscenium arch. This is the opening around the stage. A lot of shows do something with theirs. Wicked, for example, has the time dragon clock above it. With the Demon Slayer musical, they spend most of the time downstage. In non-theater speak, this means close to the audience. Or on the apron with those large screens about center stage. You can see this with the slash mark on the proscenium that replicates the breathing styles that they use and are recreated on this arch. There's a small section of stage on the left of the apron that is slanted that the characters can stand on, allowing for that extra little bit of interaction with this part of the set. By using this particular space with the slash, it allows them to have both the demon arts and breathing techniques appear like they do on the show without them having a physical representation. With a lot of the breathing styles, their actual flashiness like the lightning, the water, and etc., they aren't actually there. It's making them projections instead of physical objects like fabric that keeps this true. Lady Yamato's demon art towards the end of Act 1 really showcases how much of an effect it has, basically allowing it to completely envelop both the stage and the characters by not just appearing on the backdrop but also around that proscenium arch. Now, for those of you who have seen this show, and I mean specifically the stage show, you've probably been wondering when I was going to talk about that fight. This is the fight with the Tamari and Arrow Demons, specifically against the Arrow Demon. This is the pivotal fight during the first half of Season 1 where Tanjiro has to put his trust in Yamato, and the director puts his trust in the budget. This isn't the final fight of the show, but it will be the last thing I will cover, as everything that they have built up the show on technically comes ahead in this fight. Sorry, Kogaye, I'm skipping you. A couple of key points about this scene. You can see the projection screen go across right here. Basically, it's just a mesh screen. If it's one that you see at a distance, it's got a lot bigger gaps in it than one might think. It's similar to a tennis net. This one looks to be more like a screen and definitely has finer holes in it. Secondly, the blackout and water breathing is definitely how the show hides Tanjiro's actor getting locked into and out of the fly system. I would imagine there's a harness underneath the costume in Act 2, so that all it needs to be done is locked the cables into it. This isn't uncommon practice when you have an actor needing to get off their feet, off their stage floor, during the show. Given how he moves around in the air, it looks like it's a 2-point harness, so there's an anchor point on each hip. These are used in a ton of aerial work as it allows for more movement as the person in the harness doesn't have to worry too much about swinging around. A single point harness that would hook on in the back would make the sudden movements that the actor does in the air very jarring and likely make them dizzy by the time their feet are safely back on the floor. Kudos to the stage ninjas for being able to get in and out of the scene quick enough that you can't even catch them in a frame-by-frame look at this particular segment. By having the projections in front of the actors, it really helps sell the illusion of being tossed around by the Arrow Demon's blood art. I imagine the fly system that the actor is in is automated instead of being hand-flown to be able to keep in sync with the projections, but that's just a big assumption. I'm having to make a ton of these assumptions about technical parts as the behind the scenes and making of the show is only available on the DVD and Blu-ray of the productions, and I have yet to find them available here where I can purchase them. As well as, in my research, I couldn't find any additional information about the stage setup as the only company I was able to find whose installed system into Japanese theaters, Mitsubishi, wasn't the ones to do the Galaxy Theater where this particular show takes place, especially the recording of this show. If I'm able to get these in the future, I will absolutely make a part 2 of this particular video to share all the fun things I've learned. The same goes for the other parts of this amazing show that they've put together. With that all being said, thank you so much for watching. Please leave a like and subscribe if you would love to see more stuff like this. And until then, this is Backstage Magic signing off.